So welcome to part 2 of our Space Wolf vehicle painting video. If you'd like to see part 1 where we did the blue, which came out fantastically, then click the link on screen now. In this one we're going to be covering getting that beautiful dry brushed black-ish effect on the wolf and the gold as well. All the detailing. We're doing some edge highlighting and some washing also in the recesses, and that's really stuff that helps make your vehicle pop. Good idea on anything, any colour, always a super solid idea. Enjoy.
Okay, so before we begin the detailing, I want to cover something that you should always do after dry brushing, which is to get a clean brush and just poke your way into the recesses. You're going to get dry flakes building up in the recesses unless you're doing the most subtle dry brushing in the world with perfectly diluted paints. This is just unavoidable. You can shoot them out with an airbrush if you put it on high pressure and just spray it like you're spraying leaves out of a back garden or something, but I prefer to just get a big soft brush. You can use a wash brush from other companies, or you can use one of our ones if you want to get in there and poke. But make sure you've cleared everything before you begin the next steps, particularly given that we're going to be putting down wet paint now and we don't want to bind any of our dry bits that we've got in these recesses to the model, because at that point it becomes irreversible. Okay, so you'll notice I've got a little black tip on my brush. I keep my metallic brushes separate from my others just because it avoids cross-contamination. So we're going to be starting with Doomball Brown from Games Workshop. This is a beautifully warm brown, and it is a completely different colour to anything we've touched so far on the model. Putting a coat of this down first will just ensure that the gold we're using next, which is Retributor Armour, really lands and stays where we want it to. It can be quite difficult to get gold to cover instantly. Black under silver, brown under gold as a general rule of thumb. If you want to mix this 50-50 in with the gold for your first step, that can be a good step too. Either way though, just it's going to take a couple of coats, but we're on to the detailing now, so it's worth taking our time and making sure that we do it neatly. So this is what I would call dead space, where one detail has a detail on one side and then probably because of concerns with casting or whatever, it kind of fades into nothingness here. So at points like this, you can see I've already done it on this side here. I just go for whatever I can do to give it the most consistent straight line finish, and then I can paint around it like it is indeed a detail. So with that, it's an edge highlight, which I'm going to do with kind of the edge of the brush, middle or top of the last third, and just run that around there so we can get a nice clean edge on it. So the following step is Retributor Armour. This is a beautiful gold. I really like working with it. The ones from Vallejo are fantastic as well. There's plenty of good metallic paints out there. We've used Dark Star metals in the past. They're brilliant and airbrush incredibly well also, but I've got a soft spot for this gold, so that's what we'll be using. It should pretty much coat in one. If you need to do 2 passes though, then go for it. Just make sure that you allow it to dry completely between each stage, and if you can, make sure that it doesn't pull around the rivet. It's a very easy way to lose detail on a model, and we have dry brushed this section already, so this has been hit with more paint than it would have been if we had been layering or if we'd been dry brushing. So we're taking particular care here not to add unnecessarily texture with thick paint, because we've got a little bit more down than would be ideal already. So I've been umming and ahhing what to do with this wolf, which picked up quite a lot of really nice dry brushing accidentally throughout our painting process, and what I've decided on is actually just a thinned down black wash. You can see how it's appearing there on my palette. I've done 2 stages of it so far. You can accelerate them with a hairdryer or something or an airbrush if you're impatient like I am. So I've done a couple of stages of those, and you can just wash this as many times as you like. So black wash all over. The only thing I'm doing that's careful about this is I'm being sure to not let it pull around it. I don't want it can collect really easily in recesses like this, so when I get to the bits at the bottom, I'm carefully directing my strokes to allow it to pull in the area I want, which is these deeper sections here. So I'm ending my strokes here and lifting up. There's a couple of bits that I hit with a gold accidentally, but we'll be able to fix those with a little bit of very light dry brushing later on. But that's a really good way to get effective results. You can do that as many times as you like as well. You could do that 3 more times and end up with it super dark. You could use a little bit of blue mixed in with a black. You could do anything. It's a really useful technique, and I think it's quite an underrated one. I'm just using a size 2 here for this, but 1, 2 or 3 is all fine. While we're letting that wash, we're going to jump back to our Huldra blue. Or letting that wash dry rather. We're going to jump back to our Huldra blue, take a little bit of it carefully. I'm using my metallic brush, but it doesn't matter here because it's for metallic sections. I'm just going to take a bit of a blue, mix it in with my black wash that I've used on here. I might need to dilute it further. I can test how it's going to behave on my palette. I'm actually going to use that to go over all of these gold sections. Far more dilute than that. There we go. One of the nice things about sticking to a fairly limited palette of colours is that it can make it so mistakes are far more difficult to spot when they do happen. If this bleeds into here, I've already used this black wash on this section, so it's just a slightly more blue version of that, and it really won't stand out, therefore possibly doesn't need fixing. So just a nice little bonus of restricting your selection of colours, as well as making it easier to not have to jump between 50 paints for painting 2 different colours. I think we've used about 6 paints so far on this, and you wouldn't need too many to be used on the entire thing. So I'm using this to go around these sections here and also wash all of the gold just to make it slightly less nuts, because it was super warm. It's still going to be warm by the time we're finished, but this is going to pull it in and kind of tighten up our coherency color wise. We've just done a second pass of that wash all over the gold sections. Some of it has leaked here because I've been clumsy, so I'm just fixing it with a wet brush. What we're looking to do is build up this type of detailing effect here, whereby stuff looks a little more tarnished and old, and we're also pulling it in. We'll repeat that once more, and then we'll jump in with a silver highlight. It's taking longer to dry than expected, and I don't want to get in there too close with a hairdryer or an airbrush to dry it, so while it is doing, I'm taking the time to exaggerate some of our shades in our recesses, using exactly the same mix as I've been using on the gold. Going in there with it strong, diluting it, and then using that to fuzz out any sections that I think have come off as unsubtle. And you can go in there with a brush with only water on it to fuzz the edges of those if you're not happy with it, but little details like this section here, we can sneak in quite easily, and even if we've not been very careful, just poke our shades into the recesses. Perfect place to demonstrate this is in this kind of stepped back panel here. Kind of the first pass, you have to work fairly fast with this stuff because due to it being a heavily dry brushed area, it is very absorbent and things will dry out on it faster than they would do in other sections. But you can already see what I've gained there just by pushing that. We can do it on this section too. And we've mentioned coherency a lot through this. This is so much harder to do with the camera than the dry brushing. We've mentioned coherency a lot through this. The fact that we're using the same wash everywhere on the model is only going to go to aid that. Right, so the highlighting of these metallics. Hopefully this shows up well on my camera. We've got some silver here. This is just iron breaker, but any silver will work fairly well. Mixing in a little of our Retributor. We do want this to be a silver highlight on the gold rather than a silvery gold highlight though, so a little bit more the iron breaker. That's the type of colour we've got there in my hand. And then we're going to be proceeding with great care and concentrating on the edges here. You could do this with a traditional edge highlighting brush, but I'm looking to get a few little scuffs and stuff on the surface. And I find that easy using the extra small D. So that is us pretty much good to go. The dry brushing's worked out really well. I'm going to do a final stage of detailing here. This is completely optional. It's using a tiny brush. We're using a 000. I always try to use the biggest brush for whatever job it is possible, but we need a brush here that doesn't have long bristles, doesn't flex too much, so using a 000 or a 2 or 30 M, so a 00 or a 000 M is probably a really good idea here, and it's really important if you are doing this that you've swept the stuff out the recesses. So I'm just going to go around with a mix of our blue from our first step and black. You don't want it too wet, I'll explain why shortly, and I'm going to pretty much black line these sections. So for sections such as this, I'm going to go in at a 45-degree angle. Hopefully this shows up nicely on the camera, and with great care at exactly 45 degrees into that joint. Going to run a line of detail there. You want to let the paint be pulled off your brush into the recess, but if it's too wet it would start running up those walls, which is why I said you don't need it too diluted. So we'll be doing that all over the model, pop it on a time lapse, and the other thing is we can use the same wash if we dilute it slightly, still with a small brush because it's a precise task, and we can go around there and dot around the rivets as well. Again, as I said with this, because we dry brushed the area before, it's very porous, it's very absorbent. If you touch water here and it's gonna absorb like straight across sideways, so you can actually involve washes to avoid that type of thing. If you used a black wash on these rivets, it wouldn't, rather than just making a wash out of paint and water. The viscosity of it means that because it's thicker, it'll stay where you'd like it. So that's a top tip for this type of stuff. But I'm gonna pop on a time lapse, we'll go around and detail it, and it should really help things pop. So that's really made a difference actually. I'm not a precision painter, at least I'm not anymore. I'm an army painter, so I actually struggle with stuff like that quite a lot, but as long as you've got the right amount of dilution on your brush, being not too wet, and that's an important factor, it really helps. The other thing you could do is you could hit this entire thing with a spray of a varnish, and then you'd be worried about the capillary action a lot less in terms of it soaking up into the body of the model. Your capillary action would be making it chase the recesses then, much like an oil wash. So there's going to be one final stage, which is dotting the rivets and a little bit of edge highlighting with blue horror. I'm just using a size 0 for this. Again, it's a task you don't want it too dilute for. Get it to a point you're happy with, especially if you've mixed with your brush. You don't want it working its way up into the ferrule, so I tend to go back and wash it and then go back to my prepared mix. Remove it so we've not got anything oversaturated there, and then we're going to be using the kind of top third or top 50% of our brush to hit all of these areas with an edge highlight. This is completely optional again, but it's just another way to make sure that the entire thing pops once you're done. So this and the rivets will really add up. Again, I'll pop on a time lapse so you can see the entire process of me doing that, and then our model will be done. Okay, and we are done. So as I said, those are optional stages. Obviously over an entire army that would add quite a lot of time. It's a great result and this undeniably looks fantastic, but edge highlighting really does add up in terms of the overall time across an army. If you wanted to find a quick alternative to the washing, you could spray everything with a gloss varnish and then ink wash it, or oil wash it and then varnish it with a matte varnish again or something like that. There's plenty of other efficiency techniques you could use, but overall I think that's a super solid end result. So thank you very much for watching, and if you'd like to see me painting any more Space Marine chapters or Space Walls or anything like that, please do let us know in the comments below.
Thank you very much for joining. So that's a fantastic overall result there. Across an army, that would be a gorgeous paint scheme. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit that bell. You want to be notified when we do more stuff in the future. Subscribe, comment below if there's anything you'd like to see me painting, any requests for different color schemes, terrain, whatever it is. We're pretty open-minded about what we're going to be approaching this, and stuff we've been requested a lot. How to paint white, how to paint black, Death Guard, that type of thing. So let us know below, we much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining in.